Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a little while since I've had some SPFBO9 content, but now all of the finalists have been announced, it's time for me to read some first chapters. So for this first chapter reads video, I've got 9 books that I'm going to sample. I have read one of the SPFBO9 finalists already because Daughter of the Beast by EC Greaves was the title that I read for, or one of the titles that I read for phase 1, and which Bookborn then chose as her finalist. So that leaves me 9 titles that I haven't read, and I don't think I've read anything by any of these authors previously, so this is a whole new sample for me. The 9 titles that I've got, and I'm going to test my memory here, we have The Last Fang of God by Ryan Kirk, JDL Roselle's The Last Ranger, Master of the Void by Wend Raven, Hills of Heather and Bone by Katie Andrews, The Fall Is All There Is by C.M. Kaplan, Cold West by Clayton Snyder, Murder at Spindle Manor by Morgan Stang, R.K. Ashwick's Arrival Most Vile, and then the 9th title is The Wickwire Watch by Jacqueline Hagan. So I downloaded the sample of all of these to my Kindle from Amazon. It's a great way of sampling books. If you're not sure if you want to buy them, you can just send the first few chapters. I think it's maybe 10% of the book. I'm not entirely sure what the cutoff point is, but you can either read a sample on the Amazon webpage or you can have it sent to your Kindle to see whether it's a book that you're going to potentially or hopefully enjoy. So I did this for all 9 of these titles and then sat down yesterday and had myself a nice little reading session going through the first chapter of all 9 of these books. I think there was one of them that did have a short prologue, so I read that and then went on to the first chapter for that one. That was Master of the Void, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just going to go through these in the order I read them, which is the order they appeared on my Kindle, and that starts off with The Last Fang of God by Ryan Kirk. So this one didn't quite confuse me, but it certainly left me with a lot of questions at the end of the first chapter, which is good as long as it's done in a good way. You need to leave your reader hooked to make sure, obviously, that they carry on. With this one, we start off with a man in bed and he's woken by a noise, and it's his pretty much adult daughter who is in a kind of a trance-like state in his bedroom doorway. She wakes up from this trance, she vomits blood and then basically passes out, and he carries her back to her bed, and then he goes off to a rune caster to essentially cast the bones or the runes for his daughter and to see what the future holds. She tells him that they have to leave the town, the village, whatever it is, and that his daughter has to be given to kind of a godlike figure. I get the impression that they're gods. She says that one god fought for his daughter but wasn't able to win, and so the daughter has to be given up. I think it was the tree is calling her or something along those lines. So there's a lot in here that kind of doesn't make sense, which you obviously hope will make sense as the story progresses. There are a few mentions of wolves. Obviously there's a wolf on the cover. It's a really nice cover, by the way. I do like this one. But there's a lot of mentions of wolves and kind of being able to scent things in the air, and also talk of a pack. So it suggests werewolves or maybe just some close affinity with wolves, but those are questions that are not answered in this opening chapter. Overall, I think the opening chapter was quite well written. As I say, it leaves me wanting to know what's happening. I'm not sure it's going to be quite my style because I don't tend to do like the paranormal with werewolves and things like that. So I might have a look at this one to find out if that is the direction it takes or if we go off in a different direction, but it's certainly an intriguing opening chapter. Next up was Murder at Spindle Manor by Morgan Stang. This one was a very different type. It gave me the impression of kind of an Agatha Christie type tale. You've got a very stormy night. The main character rocks up at a guest house basically, and she goes in and gets herself a room for the night. There are 10 rooms and she is the 10th guest, so they are all full. But she is going there to murder somebody, although we don't find out the specifics of why that is or even who that is in this opening chapter. She doesn't seem to know who it is either. She just seems to know that it's one of the guests there. So it sounds kind of almost Regency. You've got the big sort of flowery dresses and things like that, and you've got a gas lamp type setting as well. The town that you can see kind of in the distance is called Lamplight, I think it is, and we do talk about gas lamps and things like that as we go through the story. It doesn't really have much of a fantasy feel to it until just all of a sudden it's announced when she's essentially booking herself into this guest house. She looks up and the receptionist has her mouth stitched shut, and she recognises this receptionist as a living doll girl. So that was quite intriguing, and it was nice the way it was just brought in as a natural thing. This is normal, she's not surprised by this at all. She just says that maybe you don't see them very often these days or something along those lines. Once she gets settled into her room, the guest opens up her trunk, her luggage, and there are a range of quite heavy firepower guns in there basically. So she is announced as a huntress, and essentially one of the other guests who are in this guest house that night is going to be her target. But as I say, we don't know who or why. So again, very intriguing. There are a lot of questions left unanswered here. It does sound like it's going to be quite a closed setting, with obviously the title being Murder at Spindle Manor. The guest house is Spindle Manor, so I would not be surprised if we spend the entirety of the book in this one location. But it does sound like the writing style and the kind of story that we get from this opening chapter should be powerful enough to be able to pull that off. The third book on my list is Cold West by Clayton Snyder. This one, I'll admit I was a little bit confused by, because it seemed to kind of jump around a little bit without warning. We start off with the narrator telling us a couple of things, and he says it started in 72 and then starts telling us the story of what happened in 72 with his wife being ill and dying, but then we just go into that and the story kind of continues from there rather than him bringing us back to present day, so to speak. So it seems slightly disjointed at that. We also have, after he buries his wife with his, after he and his two sons, to phrase that correctly, bury his wife, he kind of, I presume, falls asleep in the chair, and then he has a flashback or a dream or a memory of when he was a soldier and he was in a kind of a siege type situation, and there's people dying all around, and there's I think it's called a caller, who is kind of a wizard bringing firebolts or lightning bolts rather down from the sky. He picks up a rifle and shoots this caller, and then there are bangs at the door, and he opens the door and it's the person he was with in this memory or dream or whatever it is, and he's come to check on him, says that he's heard about his wife dying, he's heard of this bounty, and he wants the main character to go along with him to track down these wanted men. The reason as well that I found it really disjointed was probably just a quirk of the kind of timing, the size and everything on my Kindle. I literally turned the page, and on the one page I had him drinking and he's sitting in his chair, and then literally at the top of the next page we're in this battle. So it really confused me. I didn't have a clue where we were and what was going on. I had to keep flicking back and forth trying to figure out if I'd missed something, if I'd somehow managed to turn two pages on the Kindle at once and so forth, because there's no kind of scene change, there's no formatting to tell you that we're in a memory or anything along those lines. It was also slightly strange because, as I said, he starts off by saying it all started in 72, tells us what happens in 72, but when he puts the kind of the tombstone, the marker on his wife's grave, he puts the dates on there, and it's 39 to 69. So I'm not sure if we're not started yet, because he said it started in 72, or if that's a mistake, but it just added to the confusion for me. The writing style I thought was okay, it wasn't anything special for me, but it was more the kind of disjointed nature of what I got in this opening chapter that pretty much turned me off this one. Next up was a very different story. This one has more of the cozy type vibe based on the cover, the title, and what I got in the opening chapter. This was Arrival Most Vile by R.K. Ashwick. We spend this one entirely in a potion master's shop. It seems quite a young potion master, but he's very good at what he does. He tells us that he's brewing potions for adventurers, basically. So we've got kind of a typical Dungeons and Dragons type scenario with adventurers coming and stocking up in this town or city, especially in this kind of row of shops, I guess, before going out and slaying beasts or whatever it is they're doing. various people come into the shop. There are other shop owners. There's obviously this community of them there. And they're taking bets because there's another shop opening up directly opposite. They don't know what it's going to be, but it's being announced that day, that morning, because the signage is going to be revealed, so they'll know what the shop is. So they're taking bets. Is it going to be a bakery, a wand makers, or whatever it is? So with that, we see various different characters. We see various different types of character as well, various races. So you've got orcs, you've got elves, you've got dwarves. We hear about goblins, I think it is, or gnomes, or possibly both. We see a lot about the kind of the city, the history of the city, and the type of things that we might find there. All nicely done through just talking about these characters and what this shop's going to be. The shop is then unveiled, or the signage is then unveiled, and it's going to be another potion shop. So obviously not good news for our main character. So this one was, as I say, it has the kind of cozy vibe. It's very well written. I like the way that it introduces a lot of world building through all of those mentions of different characters, different races, the history of the city and how it formed and so forth, but none of it feels like it's an info dump. It's just all very nicely and very well revealed through this opening chapter. Another one which kind of gives cozy-ish vibes, but I don't think that's actually the way this book goes, is Hills of Heather and Bone by K.E. Andrews. So we start off with a woman in this one who is doing a bit of gardening. Essentially, she's got some chickens with her, and she's kind of talking to the chickens, and she's treating them as friends or part of the family rather than just pets. And she's going around, she's telling us a little bit about her husband being the kind of the gardener. He's the one who's sort of in charge of the plants. He knows everything about them. He's been teaching her, and she's going through picking some things for poultices and things along those lines. We then meet her husband, and he's doing some work, and they have a little conversation, and that conversation tells us a bit more about the magic of this world. So whilst gardening, we come across a mouse skull, and by brushing her fingertips over the mouse skull, the character is able to sense kind of the last moments of this mouse, and the kind of the feeling the mouse wants her to find the rest of its bones scattered across the garden and put him back together. During the conversation, we learn about her husband, and he is a flesh mender and a root sower, I think they are called, and she is a bone weaver, and they are all basically branches of magic. It's very rare to have two of these, so her husband is a rarity. He can kind of grow roots, grow flowers, plants and so forth, but also he can mend bones or mend flesh essentially. So he's kind of jointly a healer of people, of flesh, and a grower of plants. So then somebody knocks on the door basically, and they say that they need him. He's the only healer in town, so he basically drops everything whenever anybody needs healing and goes to help. They bring someone in. We don't see this, but we sense through the wife that there's very much an aura of death around this. So whoever they're bringing in, whoever needs healing, it sounds like they're probably not going to make it, or they're very close to death, because she can really sense it despite not being in the same room or obviously able to touch them. So I like again how we get some of the world building, some of the magic kind of subtly dropped in through what these characters are doing and what they can feel, rather than having it kind of dumped upon us. So this one, as I say, has got kind of a dark undertone, so I don't think it's as cozy as the maybe the title and the cover suggest. I have heard that as well, so maybe there's a bit of prejudice coming into that, but it does start to come across towards the end of that opening chapter as well. Okay, so Master of the Void is next by Wendraven, and this one, as I say, is the one that had a very short prologue. It's just a couple of pages, so I read that and then read the opening chapter as well. In the prologue, you've got a couple of wizards who are going out in a pretty bad storm, and they're looking for some lost quarry workers. They've not returned from the end of their shift, basically, so they're going out to find them. They've got all this mud everywhere because it's so badly raining, and then they eventually come across these miners, and they are kind of dead, buried, half buried in the mud, looking very surprised. And then they, the two wizards, are basically engulfed by the mud as well. So there's some kind of being, whether it's a monster or the ground taking on shape itself, I don't know, but it kind of swallows them up as well. We don't hear anymore, we don't find out about it, so that's just left kind of hanging. Then for the opening chapter, we've got a young man, I guess, who's at university, or he's a university student, I should say, because he's actually at home at the time. He's studying, he's disturbed by a friend of his. They go off somewhere to see the fairy lights, I think it is, kind of fireflies. It's a kind of a 2-day event, so they've only got a short opportunity to see it, so they go out to watch that. The girl says that she was let onto the family grounds by the boy's brother. He realises that his brother has done that to get him in trouble, so he runs back home and he kind of senses his father's displeasure or his disappointment in him. But it feels like it's a literal sensing rather than just metaphorically. He knows his father's going to be disappointed. It comes across to me, at least on the page, as he can actually sense his father's disappointment, so there's maybe some kind of magical element there. We then go to another scene, and it's a young boy who goes into a mine because it's just in time, they're coming off shift and his father is one of the miners. We see a wizard in there kind of marking areas for the miners to dig for gems or ore or whatever it is that's in this mine. Seems a little bit strange because it's literally right in the entrance of the mine, and then he moves on, but the miners are coming from much deeper, but there we go. And then as they're walking out of the mine, the boy says to his dad, basically, tell me again about the mages, and the father starts telling him about all of the different types of mages, what they're called, what colour they are, what they do. So that one, unlike basically the previous two, it does seem like it's more of an info dump. We're given very specific information, but it doesn't come across to me in a very natural way. It's just very kind of out of the blue. Tell me again about the mages. You've already done this. I'm going to ask you questions to prompt you about certain of them, but we're going to tell you, for the readers basically, all the different types of magic, what those mages are called, and what they can do. So this one didn't really work for me as well as some of the others, largely for that, but also because I wasn't really able to get much of a grasp on the kind of the ongoing story here. I didn't really know what direction it was going to take from those 2 scenes plus the opening prologue as well. So one potentially to look at checking out more of, but certainly the opening part of it didn't grip me as much as some of the others did. Next up for me was the Wickwire Watch by Jacqueline Hagan. This is probably out of all of the 10, I guess, finalists of SPFBO9. This is one that I've heard probably the most about, seen more people reading it and really raving about it, so we'll see how that translates when it comes to the full judging group. But with this one, we have a school teacher. He's walking home, he's got a kind of cart with him, I guess, with his bits and pieces. So he's pushing this cart home. It's cold, he's miserable because he's out in the cold. He gets home, basically puts the fire on straight away, and then he sits down and he's got this strange piece of glass that he had found that morning, and it's very strange. There's some details of it. It looks like it's more than just a piece of glass, basically. It gives kind of a vibe that there's some magical ability to this, or there's something within the glass just outside of his perception, for instance. Then he basically goes to sleep and he dies in the sleep. He doesn't wake up again. So it was quite a short opening chapter. It was quite, I guess, abrupt in that sense, because it does start out by saying if he knew he was going to die, he probably would have stayed at home that day, or words to that effect. So it's kind of signposted in the opening line of the book, but at the end of the first chapter, it's basically he went into the deepest slumber he's ever had, and then by morning he was dead. So slightly surprising in that sense, just the suddenness of it, even though it was foreshadowed at the start of the book. Either way, there's not too much that's given in this one. Again, it's quite a short chapter, so there's not too much room for it, but it was still quite intriguing for that. It was quite well written, so it's definitely one that I can see enticing people to read more, to find out exactly what's going on. Obviously, we don't know our characters, or I presume we don't know our characters, because the only one we've been introduced to at this point has passed away by the end of the first chapter. The penultimate one of the 9 that I sampled was The Fall Is All There Is by C.M. Kaplan. This one, for all that it's a relatively long chapter compared to all of the others, or certainly that previous one, not a lot really seems to happen in it. It does tell us quite a bit, but there's not a lot that actually kind of physically, I guess, happens. We're given the information that the character we're following has left his home. He's is some noble, possibly royal family, and he left them basically 5 years ago, and he moved in with this other kind of noble house. The house that he's now living in is basically made out of the bones of a giant lizard, and we go through and we see some of the corridors and so forth, and it's all very weird. There's kind of plasma fields, so there's a bit of science fantasy in this one, and we're told about the ghost fog outside, and that if you breathe that in, you're basically breathing in the dead, and it pretty much makes you dead by the sounds of things. So it's all a very interesting world there. He's received letters anyway from his 2 brothers, and he's surmised from those, or is read between the lines, is I think the idea that I get, rather than specifically what's in the letters, that they want him to go home to swear fealty to his sister, who's going to be crowned very soon, basically. So that's the bit. He's told that they're coming to collect him, or one of them's coming to collect him, and that they need to take him home. But the swearing fealty thing, I got the impression that was a reading between the lines. So he goes to talk to an elder, basically, to get some advice, but it seems like advice that he doesn't actually want or need, because they have a bit of a chat, and that's most of the opening chapter. But at the end of it, he pretty much ignores what the elder says. He's already got his mind made up, and he's basically trying to get the elder to say, yeah, actually, what you already know or think is the right thing to do. Go ahead and do it. He's also got some injections that he needs to kind of boost him. It says to make him able to kind of comprehend the decision that he's got to make, and by the time tomorrow morning comes and his brother arrives, he'll be able to deal with him. It does say at one point he'll be able to become a top athlete, kind of physically or whatever. So I'm not sure what these injections are, but they obviously seem to affect his mind and also his body, and make him very alert and very intelligent, or something along those lines. So that's probably the main question for me. What is that? And also the other one would be, what is going on outside with this world, with this ghost fog and so forth. The writing itself of this one did seem a little bit disjointed to me. It didn't really draw me in. It's not sort of a writing style that necessarily works for me. So despite having those questions, I would say I'm probably personally okay with not finding out the answers to those. And then the last one was another quite short chapter. This one was The Last Ranger by J.D.L. Roselle. This is actually the only one that I previously had, before SPFBO anyway, on my list. It was one that I wanted to try out because I have been interested in checking out J.D.L. Roselle's work. The opening chapter here is very different as well. It takes a different tack, although I have seen it done before. It's from the point of view of an animal. So we have a fox watching a rider. It's a girl, I think relatively young, maybe a young woman would be more appropriate, riding, and this fox is watching her. The fox kind of remembers her. He apparently looked after her or looked out for her when she was younger, and now she's older, she's got to fend for herself. Basically, the fox does kind of say to himself that he can't save her from herself. So it kind of gives the impression that the path she's literally going down at the moment, there is death ahead, there is something there, whether it's some big beast or entity. We're just given a kind of a sense of it, and the fox won't go any further, basically. So she's going there, he's going to stop and go off on his own path and let her do it on her own, basically. So I think this is quite interesting, because although we don't really get a lot from this opening chapter, I like that where it's from the viewpoint of a fox, we have a different kind of worldview, essentially. We've got different wording. So instead of saying that she was a girl when they first met, she was a kit. instead of talking about her actual clothing, it's more along the lines of, like other humans, she wears the skins of slain beasts or something like that. So I thought that was very interesting. It was very well done. It was quite atmospheric, despite the fact that it was only short. It does give me, again, like all of these have, some questions that I hope to be answered within the next few chapters of the books. But this one, as I said, I was already looking at doing so I'd like to continue at some point and find out what those answers are. So from what I remember of the opening chapter of Daughter of the Beast as well, that one is, again, very different. We've got a good range of books here based on those opening chapters, some very different styles, both in the terms of the, I guess, the subgenre. We've got some Western, we've got some cozy, we've got some science fantasy, we've got your typical epic fantasy, we've got a Slavic based one being Daughter of the Beast, we've got Gaslamp. So there's a real good range of titles in here. There's no two books that are really the same or even too close to each other. So yeah, I'm very interested to see how the judging panels react to all of these different styles, what works for whom, and what eventually comes out on top. So hopefully we'll be finding out more about those soon anyway, because we've got a few months now for the finalists to be read, reviewed, and all the scores going into the scoring board. But you can find out details of that in the links down below this video. I'll leave a link to Mark Lawrence's blog where we've now got the finalist table, which will be updated as the finalist reviews come in. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this look at the opening chapter of the 9 SPFBO9 semi-finalists that I've not already read. Which one sounded most interesting to you? Have you read any of these? Let me know in the comments below what you thought of them. I'll hopefully catch you in the next video sometime soon. Until then, of course, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.